Romans readers, all right. Last time we saw that the whole point of this book is to explain the gospel, which is that Jesus is king, and if he's king, we need to be obedient. It's not the case that you can just decide whether, I may or may not invite Jesus into my heart, maybe I'll accept him as king or not. That's not how it works. He is king. The question is, are we obedient or not? What Paul is saying in chapter 1, that whole section that we didn't actually spend a lot of time on, is that the Gentiles are under the wrath of God. They have known what to do. They were without excuse. And yet, they have done evil, they have sinned, and so they've fallen under the wrath of God. Chapter 2, we meet somebody new. Paul has a hypothetical discussion partner. He refers to as "O man." And this man judges. O man who judges. He says it again. O man who judges. This man who judges is judging the Gentiles. That's all of us, by the way, right? Judges the Gentiles, saying that this man who judges everybody else, will be able to escape the judgment of God. How is it that this person is judging everybody else, thinking that they can escape the judgment of God? Because Paul wants to pause them and say, you know what? In fact, you are storing up wrath for yourself. So we need to ask, who is this person who's judging all these Gentiles over here? Who is this? It's the Jews. And what Paul is saying is that you Jews, you know what? You're in fact just like the Gentiles, under the wrath of God. Jews too are under the wrath of God. But there's a problem. Because the Jews would say, no way that that's the case. We are God's chosen people. We've got the law. We've got prophets. We have Moses, the Ten Commandments, the Exodus. Look, if you call yourself a Jew and rely on the law and boast in God. See, here's what the Jews thought. The Jews were God's special people. They got all those gifts from God, including the law and the Ten Commandments. Now, the Jews knew that wrath was coming. It was coming on the Gentiles. They knew that God's wrath was going to fall on all the sinners. And the Jews said, well, how do we escape this? What's going to keep us Jews out of the wrath of God? They imagined like a wall. And the law was like a wall, like a shield, like a barrier. It was going to keep the wrath of God from falling on them. Because what they saw the law was functioning as, the law was like a badge or a get out of jail free card or a symbol. Only the Jews got the law from God. Nobody else in all the world got the law. So the Jews ended up taking this to mean we're God's special people. If we have this and nobody else has the law, it must be a sign that we're going to be saved. It's the law is acting like a shield from the wrath of God. Paul's challenging that notion. Paul is saying, listen, here's what the law says. We all know those Gentiles. We all know they're a mess. They've been worshiping crocodiles and gods up in heaven and Zeus. They're a disaster. We all know that. But here's what the law also says. You Jews are also sinners. You Jews are also going to face the wrath of God. And the law doesn't function as a shield. The law functions as saying the Gentiles are sinners and the Jews are sinners. What Paul is saying is that you Jews, in this matrix, you Jews have misunderstood the purpose of the law. That's not how the law functions. You were wrong. You were wrong to judge, think you're going to escape, when in fact you are storing up wrath for yourselves. Because the law doesn't just condemn Gentiles, it condemns Jews. Towards the end of the chapter, Paul starts using verses from their own book to prove his point. So this verse here, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. Paul takes that from Isaiah. What Paul is saying is that your own book says it was you. God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you. You Jews did it. You Jews are sinners just as bad as the Gentiles together. And it's the law who says Jews and Gentiles together. So the law does not act like a shield. The law acts like an equal judge, saying Gentiles and Jews, both of you are now going to face wrath. Now, as you can imagine, Paul's shifting the paradigm here. Paul's saying it's not a shield, it's a judge over both Jews and Gentiles. As you can imagine, that's not going to go over very well. The Jews are going to say, Paul, we find your model here highly offensive. We do not agree. We think you should stop talking because you are slandering us and God. And Paul is saying, this model, I think, is a total misinterpretation of what the law actually is. We'll look at that tomorrow, Romans chapter 3.